I don't know, Rich. We can make training sexy. I feel like is the word of Q2 right now is making AI sexy. Don't make it complicated. Just make it
Yeah,
sexy.
that's true. Who cares if it works?
Welcome to the show, where AI takes the floor. Lee and Rich on the mic.
Welcome to the AI Guys podcast, where we make artificial intelligence easy to understand for everyone. I'm your host, Lee Dixon, and as always, I'm joined by the man who runs out of things to say about AI, Rich Swire. How you doing today, man?
I'm doing good. I'm really excited about today's topic.
Yeah,
This has been on the queue. I've been looking forward to it.
It's not the sexiest topic that we've covered by any means.
No, it's the hard stuff. It's the hard stuff that nobody wants to talk about.
It is. If you've gotten through 30-something episodes of our podcast, and you're wondering when are they going to get to the hard stuff, we're here. It's about to get real hard.
We've arrived.
Real hard on this pod.
Exactly.
So, one of the things we're going to be really diving into today, and we'll probably have to do this in more sessions as well, but for those that have been listening for a while, we have a company named Rhea. We build an agentic workforce platform, and you guys have heard us talk about some client use cases and where it fits into certain verticals. But today we're going to focus less on the vertical or the industry that they actually are in, and more about the complexity of training AI, because I do feel that we've touched on it in a few different ways, flirted with it a little bit, and really where we're finding a gap in some of the knowledge that's actually out there from what we found, but also our listeners come into, is really this training piece. It's like, oh, I give it some documentation and then it kind of does it. Or there's out of the box solutions that just take this agent or this bot that we've built, plug it into your system, and it's good to go. And I feel like that's a little bit of a, not lie is the right word, but it's disingenuous to a degree. So, it might be a little bit boring, but we're going to make it fun. So let's pull back the curtain a little bit. Let's get into the complexity of training AI. And first and foremost, Rich, maybe let's talk about some of the foundational pieces we need to keep in mind, touching on clean and concise data.
Yeah. So, I think it's probably good to understand exactly what we mean by training first. So essentially, when you think about AI, at the end of the day, it is one big database, right? So we're all familiar with what a database is. And a database obviously has a lot of utility for different reasons. But in the sense of AI, this database is stored in a unique way, and using kind of, without getting too crazy technical, it's basically using a vectorized format. So the idea is that instead of looking at a table like an Excel spreadsheet where you have columns and rows, and it's for a human, they can see oh, okay, this is the column of this and this is the row of that, and we can see that and make sense of it. In the sense of how these large language models work is that they're these massive databases that are taking text, some portion of that text, and then putting it and creating a mathematical representation of that text, which is in the form of a vector. And then how close a vector can get to another vector shows similarity, and that's where, of course, you get predictability. So you don't really need to know the technical side, but it will matter when we talk about why things go wrong, right? Because it's AI is not as deterministic as, for example, for lack of a better term, the most remedial database, which is like a spreadsheet. So if you go to a spreadsheet and you say, what's in column A and row 7, it'll give you the answer, right? Think of that as your standard database query, and it will give you the same answer every single time. Well, AI doesn't work that way. AI is taking that information, creating a series of vectors based on the weights and measures that you put in there, and also based on a variety of other configurators that you might come in, and of course, based on everything else that's already been uploaded. And it puts it into this kind of three-dimensional space and looks for similarity. So that's really where it all starts to fall apart if you don't really do a good job of preparing for training. Because if you just upload random documentation, the AI is going to interpret it and basically chunk it up into different pieces and start vectorizing it randomly. And whatever comes out of it, comes out of it. Now, when you think about the three kind of documents that you would typically upload into AI, there's some consideration that you have to put in play, right? So the first one, which is the more obvious one, which is very long formatted text. So imagine if you wanted to upload a book, right? If you wanted to take Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, and then upload it to a AI model, it will do a pretty good job of vectorizing that long format PDF or whatever it might be, and allow you to query that pretty easily. And I think that would probably be the most common use case that most people start with AI, and they go, wow, this is really amazing. I uploaded a document they
dump everything in there,
right,
and they expect this is a surprising output.
Yeah, and it works because it's a very big document, and there's really no structure to it other than chapters, and it's a lot of information that's very diverse, meaning like Shakespeare, he might use a few words like thou and thus and and here too.
And thee.
Yeah, but that,
thou and thus and thee.
But that kind of gets wiped out, and AI does a really good job. So if you ask it what happened when so-and-so did so-and-so, it'll come back with a great response. So that's so most models out of the box, you can drag and drop that Romeo Juliet PDF right into the vector store or whatever, and off and running, you're going pretty good, and you're at 95% efficacy. The second type of document is what I would call more smaller pieces of information, but repetitive, meaning like you might have a great example would be like a bunch of support tickets, right? Or a bunch of emails where
they're all going to be around a topic, but the delivery of that topic might be different.
Right, and it's a smaller amount of information, but repeating over a period of time. An email would be a great example. Like every email has a subject, to, from, and then some sort of body of text, but you have thousands of them. And so if you wanted to upload thousands of emails into a vector store, you have to treat that differently than the Romeo and Juliet, which is a massive, large document. And this is why you have, like if you use OpenAI or pretty much any model, you have what are called text embeddings large and text embeddings small. And what that means is that you're telling the AI to treat these things a little bit different when you create the embeddings so that you have a higher efficacy and a better result. And then the third piece, the third type of document is what I would call, and those, the first two I would call unstructured data, meaning like there's really no structure, it's just text. Maybe there's a couple of things like chapter and subject and body, but for the most part, it's not structured. You could put the entirety of it, stream of consciousness, and it would make sense still.
Yeah.
Then the third piece, which is really the most complicated piece, is structured data, right? This is like a classic spreadsheet or a CSV file or anything like that needs to have that structure to make sense. So once you take it out of that structured, it starts to kind of blend together randomly. So imagine like if you had, like just take, any type of spreadsheet.
Columns and rows with financial data.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
They're going to have an invoice number to it. They're going to have a value that's assessed to it, and
right. So let's just take a P&L statement from your business, and you have all the GLs and your numbers, and then let's just say you kind of copy that and paste it as just open text, but then it's just kind of like this stream of text that you're hoping the AI knows that this column means this and that column means that. It might misinterpret columns, or maybe one column's empty, so it assumes the next number is that column, and next thing you know, your P&L is all out of whack. Whereas you want to preserve the format of that, and typically that's done by converting those structured documents into a well-known format called JSON, which is a JSON format, which is essentially kind of like a modern-day XML, where you're kind of maintaining the structure of that information, but you're offering it up in a text document. So now that we've kind of
said this episode wasn't going to be sexy.
No, this is super. Yeah, this gets
listen to all the acronyms.
It gets better.
Oh, I'm on the edge of my seat.
Yeah. So so that gives you kind of an idea of, okay, first and foremost, before you start training your AI, you might have different processes or a different step-by-step instructions that you want to apply depending on if you're type 1, type 2, type 3, right? And that's going to be a big differentiator in how you approach training. So like a lot of our clients will say, hey, I want to build an AI. I want to train it on our legal documents, right? Okay, great. That's fine. But then even that, because like legal documents are typically long form, and you could obviously upload them and have an AI query them. But there is some segmentation, meaning like one, you might have a different NDA for this customer than you might have a different NDA for that customer. So when you differentiate the terms, there can be bleed over because they're very similar documents, but maybe you want to isolate those, or at least identify that was this document versus that document. So typically what we do is you kind of have this really interesting combination of the two. And this is kind of where I get into like best practices. So best practice would be that you would actually have not just your, dump all your legal documents almost as like one massive large text file, and then hope the AI picks up on the headers correctly. You would want to go through a transformation of, first and foremost, you'd want to identify each document with a title, with a summary of what that document is, allowing the AI to give context. Think of it like a prompt. And then you would have a third piece of that document, which would be converting it into either Markdown language, which is a kind of standard format, or you could also convert that into JSON as well. But you're giving the AI some guidance on what the headlines are versus what the normal text is. That is a huge deal that most people miss. So if you just upload a document with just all the same, imagine just like reading a document with all the same font size, with no
no formatting whatsoever.
Right.
It's just
you would
all
be
there.
like, okay, I'm not sure where the headings are. I'm not sure where the bullet points are. I'm not sure where the subheadings are. Same goes with HTML websites, right? Like you're looking at a website, you have a headline 1, headline 2, headline 3, bold, means something. Well,
there's something that differentiates what value the reader needs to take on the line that's on.
And AI reads that really well. So when you think of the two primary formats when you're training your AI, it is best practice to convert. It's not necessarily always required. It does depend on the use case. But if you are looking at doing something the right way and that you don't want to have to go back and redo it, we always convert to the lowest common denominator of a JSON format or Markdown format. It doesn't mean that you can get away with large text files like PDFs and so forth, but certainly those are the two standard formats that most models would prefer because it's machine readable, if that makes sense. But it's also human readable. And actually recently you started seeing, this is something I didn't see a while ago, but like even I went into Google Docs, and I usually, use Google Docs if I'm going to like store a Markdown document that I'm using for training. And I usually cut and paste in it, and it just sustains the Markdown format. But then now Google Docs automatically converts it into like a human readable, identifies the bold, identifies the headlines, which shows you like all these different tools are starting to maneuver back to Markdown, or at least be compatible with moving from Markdown to like what we would normally see as far as a document format.
Yeah.
So like that's kind of like I would say like that's like the core of what you really need to understand. We'll get into the nuances in a second, but like at a minimum, that's where you need to get. You need to say, okay, what data am I training on? What kind of data is this? Text embedding small, large, or is this really structured data? And then how do I get that into a Markdown or JSON? You get that, you get that far, you're on to a good start.
Well, and it's important too, because this quality of data conversation comes up a lot, and like you're kind of alluding to, it's not necessarily like just someone hands over a bunch of really bad data and they're like, make this work for me, right? Like companies and businesses that we tend to work with have, pretty robust metrics on like how they want to manage data. And then they get to a point where they go, oh my God, like between all the legacy stuff we have, plus the things in here that are just, old outdated features we don't even have anymore, the cleanliness of it is a problem. But I do think that the quality also then leads into, like you said, just like creating some type of hierarchy with that documentation. Like, why is this relevant for the AI agent to have? Is it just something you want it to have because the person that, works in that department also has that knowledge right now? Like, does the AI really need it for this specific role? And if they do, creating some type of standardization that allows them to, like you said, get into it, understand it quickly, and then use it to its best capability.
Yeah, I mean, what I think is going to happen, and this is the I think number one reason why it's going to take a long time for companies to really execute on this plan of building out an agentic workforce or some sort of scalable agentic framework, because the first thing they absolutely need to do, if they are serious about deploying either sales support, internal operations, whatever the use cases might be, is that they need some core knowledge base. And so we went through this in the 90s where every business realized that their business functional data, like it used to be called ERP, it may not be called that anymore, but they knew that their financials and their project management, their supply chain, their employee, their HR was all in these different spreadsheets back then, or even systems to some degree, and they were all disparate. So like, if you needed to tie your supply chain into your delivery system and then into your finances for billing, it was like the machines weren't talking, right? And so there was this massive integration effort, in the late 90s and then up till today, where people were merging and connecting their, what I would call their functional systems. This is where like numbers are going back and forth, right? Like the billing and how many hours did I spend on this project and how much did that, item cost for my supply chain. Now, knowledge is starting to become the new enterprise resource planning, where now every company is like, oh, you know what? I haven't updated our knowledge base for our products or for our services in years. Nobody even looks at that, or we don't even have one. We don't really, we have a bunch of PDFs in some folder.
Yeah, that's another one.
And
man.
our SOPs, our standard operating procedures are kind of in some Word docs over here in a weird format. And then we have our policies are somewhere in our HR portal if an employee needs it, but I'm not even sure we've updated those. Our terms of service is on our website. So you have this problem where you have a disparate system of knowledge. And then just to kind of understand how big of a deal it is if you want to deploy AI at scales, you need to consolidate all that into a singular source at a minimum to make sense of it, to make sure it's updated and accurate. Otherwise, if you start training your AI on all these outdated documents and you don't really track where it came from, when the AI makes a mistake or says the wrong thing, where do you go to correct it? If you correct the AI, that's great, but you didn't actually correct the source of truth.
Solve the root of the problem.
Yeah. So what you have to identify when you're deploying AI is I need to have, and you can have multiple, I'm not saying you have one singular, but you definitely have to create a source of truth. No different than you have a source of truth for your financials.
Your CRM, anything.
You have your customer database. There's a source of truth. You might extract things out of those source of truth and do things and manipulate them like we always do with like spreadsheets and stuff. But you need to have that source of truth, that knowledge base. Yeah. And then that knowledge base is what can then be could be the factory for exporting your training documentation, aka JSON objects and your Markdown. It can export that stuff or feed real time, ideally, your AI. And of course, reverse, because your AI gets trained and has human feedback from its actual usage on a day-to-day basis. It can actually put that information back into a knowledge base without, and that then you're guaranteed to have the single source of truth. It's also a great thing where, you and I have run into this many times where 30-40% of the good stuff, the good knowledge of the business is actually still in people's heads. So
tribal knowledge,
being able to convert that, which is from one person's brain into the AI, is another thing that we try to implement within a business. And that's another reason why using those people to train the AI is the best way to transfer that knowledge. So if they're on the AI using, like, for example, we offer a product called Rhea Copilot, where you're talking to your AI agent. If you have one of your best and brightest in your support team conversing with that AI and correcting the AI, asking questions, the AI gives an answer, says, no, that's not right, this is right. Then what you're essentially doing is that person is now training the AI, and then that AI gets smarter. And then there might be 50 support people that are accessing that same AI who are now getting the best and the bright,
operating on the highest level.
And so you really have to kind of create a centralized repository for this and a system that works for the AI. And it's great that I need this document. Oh, Sally knows where that is. Or I need this document. Oh, go ask Jim where that is. That's fine in the world of human-based business. But when you're starting to really get serious about building out an agentic workforce, you can't take that. You can't take advantage of that flexibility. You have to basically start to commit to a centralized knowledge base.
Yeah, and it's important to remember too that, like you said, having a top performer or someone who has authority in that specific knowledge, like providing reinforcement in the AI learning, is huge. It's not just because the fear that someone has of like, oh great, I'm training my AI replacement, but it's really, like you said, if you've got, let's say, a support team of 50. Right, which is not uncommon in a lot of companies that we work with. So I've got 50 support people, 10 of them I don't ever have to worry about. because I know that they've been with us for a long time. They maybe came from a sister product and they've moved over to our team, whatever the case may be. The other 40, it's not that they're bad. Their level of knowledge just isn't there. So they're utilizing our knowledge base. They're sifting for those answers. Sometimes they're maybe giving incomplete answers.
Or they're
sure.
taking the time of the senior reps, right? They're kind of going,
Exactly.
oh, hey, Jim, can you help me take over this call? Now your senior reps are overloaded with calls, and the other guys are kind of being lazy about it, right?
Yeah, so you bring the floor up a couple of levels, right? Now everybody is referencing the Jim AI, if you want to think of it that way, where I'm now being able to converse with it directly. I don't feel bad as maybe a newer rep because I'm not asking the dumb questions to a superior. I'm asking it to an AI that's making me better and giving me the muscle memory and the repetition of it. I think that's huge. But the human in the loop piece is another one that we talk about a lot on the podcast. We've talked a lot with customers, and you kind of did a great transition into that. This deployment stage where training is a big piece of that doesn't just end when something goes live. And I think that's another piece too. It's not that, your solution will never be ready. I think that's another fear that people have in the AI space. It's like, oh God, well, I'm going to have to just keep training this all the time. It's like, no, you don't do that with your employees. You do have ongoing training. You do check in with them and make sure that they're performing at a level you're happy with. And AI is no different.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think it's important to talk about how you get from I don't know what the heck's going on to a fully deployed agentic based support. So let's just use support as the use case, but this is going to relate to any sort of use case. So the first step is I have a bunch of information. It's in disparate systems. I don't know where, a bunch of files over here, a bunch of files over here. You got to consolidate all those into a singular knowledge base that is accessible by the AI. And if we need to update a standard operating procedure, if we need to update an FAQ or whatever, you can do it in one singular place, right? So that's where it starts. Then you need to transform that into, as we discussed earlier in the call, the formats and get that into an AI agent, right? So that's what I would call baseline one for training. Okay, so it knows everything that's in these documents, but there's still a lot of things it doesn't know, right? All the stuff that's outside of what's been recorded in those documents. Now, you might also incorporate, past tickets, past other things, but for the most part, let's just say that's baseline one. Then you let the support team use that tool as a co-pilot while they're answering support tickets. So imagine the support ticket comes in, they toggle over to the AI and say, hey, this guy wants to know X, Y, and Z. The AI goes, here's my answer. Then the support person says, actually, I don't think that's the right answer. I'm going to go ask somebody, or I might already know what the right answer is. I'm going to update the AI, and then I'm also going to obviously answer the question for the support person. But what you're doing there is over time, the AI is going to get smarter and smarter, and that's what we call human feedback. But it's happening real time as they're actually taking on current tickets, and it's not so much the AI is wrong; it's the AI just wasn't trained on it.
It's learning it.
Right.
Yeah.
So whatever that question was, it might have been something that was recent. It wasn't documented in the current knowledge base. But now by giving that AI feedback, you're now updating the AI and then, of course, recursively updating your knowledge base. You're going to do that for a period of time until you feel like the AI has a high efficacy. It's answering 95% of these questions it's getting right. And then you're going to learn a lot about how AI answers and what it says differently than what you would say. But for the most part, you're going to get to a point where it's at a high efficacy. And now, that's human feedback, and that's done through our Copilot software as well, right? That's very easy to do. And it has like a ChatGPT interface with a thumbs up, thumbs down, wrong answer, here's the right answer, and so forth. Now, let's go. Now you're getting really cocky, and you're like, oh man, this AI is money. It's better than it's ever been. And your support team is now able to take on more tickets, have higher capacity, and perform better, and spend more time on quality on our customers and helping with qualified issues instead of being bombarded by mundane tickets. So now your AI team gets really I think we could expose this to our clients. So now you expose it as live chat or some other interface to your clients because it is actually doing a good job. And maybe you have some escalation terms in there. Maybe it's answering 40-50% of your tickets because that's like hey, how do I change my password? How do what's the address?
Yeah, all the time suck ones that take up.
How do I reschedule my appointment and all that stuff? But then there might be some escalation words in there like billing or whatever. You say, I still want to have that handled internally.
Yeah, cancellation.
But now you've taken 40, 50, 60% of your tickets and it's being solved by AI, right? And now you're like living the dream because now you can actually do way more with way less, right? And then you're getting to the point where AI is talking to the customer and it starts saying things, and you could have somebody, because you have more time, your support team, dedicated to monitoring the AI. So you'll see your support team going from customer support to AI training. I think that transition is going to be the biggest transition from a global workforce that you're going to see. You're going to see anybody who's kind of under this general label of customer support is going to transition into this AI trainer, because what's happening is you're letting the AI take on the initial call, and then you're sitting there monitoring it almost like a manager. And then when the AI makes a mistake, you just simply click a button, and this is what we call human in the loop, where a human can now take over that conversation and guide it down the right way. And if the AI is getting something wrong, or maybe the person is asking for something that the AI is not able to deliver, let's say it requires a lookup of their account or something like that, and you're not comfortable giving AI access, then you can just toggle human in the loop and the person takes over. So again, though, all of that being documented, all of that being used for training. Yeah. And this transformation is really threefold. You're transforming from a 100% human-based, very costly, low capacity, no retention. So think about the average support team. What's your churn?
Selling it hard, Rich.
Yeah, like 4 or 5 people out of your 50 are going to leave every year minimum. And then you have to hire somebody new. Okay, so
you're right back at the beginning.
Yeah, so you're moving from that to, okay, now I've got a fully autonomous tier 1 AI answering 40-50% of my tickets, allowing my support team to breathe and be able to address bigger issues with bigger customers. Also, at the same time, because the AI has been trained on such high efficacy, you can also now turn the AI into your number one trainer. So let's say you still have churn. People churn out no matter what.
All the new people that are coming in.
All the new people come in.
Now get Jim.
Exactly. Now you don't have to take your best support agent off of their job to train the new guy, because you want to make sure the new guy is best trained. And also, by the way, all the new guys are starting to transfer into becoming AI trainers, right? So that allows for that AI to do even more automated. So every time a question comes in and the answer is wrong, it's wrong because not just from the AI perspective, but from all the humans are probably wrong too, because nobody's been trained on it.
Yeah. Or like you said, there's no master record, meaning everyone answers it differently.
Exactly. And I'll end on this point because it's a funny point to make, which is, all of our customers, when they deploy AI, it's such a magical thing, obviously, when you see it working and you're seeing it talking and answering questions, you're like, man, this is amazing. But then the second it gets something slightly wrong, they have this like weird mentality of like, oh my God, that's, they said it slightly wrong. And why did it say
I really want them to say it this
way. Why
instead.
did they say it that way? It's like, well, it's AI. It has a mind of its own. It will do those unless you train it or unless you instruct it otherwise, which that's the whole point of human feedback. But what's funny about it is that, I always ask my customers, like, well, how many of these tickets with all that were being answered prior to AI do you scrutinize at this level? Because I can guarantee you, if you were recording and watching every single response to a support ticket that your current staff is doing, there's going to be a higher level of inaccuracy. They just
100%.
So there is a mind shift here and a culture shift as well. So I think expectations are very important to set up front when you're training. Is that when you out of the box AI, if it's trained well on your core documentation, is going to be at 85%, 90% if you really do a good job of efficacy. That last 10% is the last mile, and that is the hardest part. And that requires dedication of your reps, or at least some sort of repetitive Q&A process where you're doing human feedback to get to that level of that you need to get to in order to release AI into the wild. Now, the cool news is that at 80%, 85%, 90% efficacy, you should be more than comfortable to release AI as a co-pilot tool that only your team can access, because that does not expose it to your customers. So that's why we do that phased approach. Initial training, initial feedback, release it to your internal team, initial feedback. When it hits a certain level of efficacy, release it to your customer, continue feedback, and then all the while moving a portion of your support team into becoming AI architects, becoming the people that actually maintain and train the AI. And then you wake up one day and that AI agent is the smartest person in the room. And then you unlock all the other capabilities of that model that you've built, which is really what you're doing. You're building your own custom model. And then you could turn around and have that AI write emails, write blogs, write training, write your entire new knowledge base, build out custom, knowledge bases for your customers. You have this ad infinitum capability of now producing once you know that this AI is trained up on your business, that's really like the golden, I think, era that everybody wants to get to, but they don't quite understand how to get there step by step.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we've outlined a couple areas that companies can avoid for sure is just not running into a problem where you feel like it's not fixable. Because I do think that when we talked about a couple different times on different episodes, but this piece of control is they don't want to give away control, and when they do, they're immediately within maybe a 30 to 90 day window, right? They're looking for a reason to grab control back. They don't like not having it. So like you said, an answer comes back maybe the way they wouldn't say, or it's incomplete, maybe because the data wasn't there, but AI tried to do a good job with it. And it's like a reason that they reach back out to be like, see, I got to take that back because this isn't good. And it's like, well, no, very similar to a new employee, you're not giving them access to every piece of your business and say, now you need to go do this job. Like, they go through a training period where they are observed by the top performers in their space, and they're shadowing and they're doing all this stuff. And AI is really no different, but the training and the complexities that lay there tend to be much easier to overcome when you actually have a plan in place, or you can show, this is the information I want it to be trained on. What are your thoughts? Because a lot of times we'll come in and say, this is actually really good. Or, hey, you know what? We don't need all of this for what you're talking about. We really only need this amount. Mm-hmm. And it helps them go, oh, great. Well, then we'll add this later as time goes on. So, it's just creating a plan is obviously important, knowing what you're putting in and not maybe overstepping an objective or like making it too broad, like really giving it definitive blinders on what it should be focusing on. And then making sure that the knowledge represents that specific role, I think, are pretty key takeaways for businesses.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a new role, right? Nobody's doing it doesn't exist. Yeah. Like, if you ask if you ask 100 companies, hey, who in your company trains your AI? The answer is zero, right? No, it does. This role does not exist in the way that we explain AI today, generative AI, as like who is the guy training your support AI? Now, obviously, training AI and algorithms have been around forever. So, I mean, there's many, many people out there that are training algorithms. There's thousands of those people, but it's more...
We're all training an algo every day. We jump on social media
I guess we're all training the algos, right?
Yeah.
But as far as like a dedicated rep or position within a company, that just hasn't come. And the most natural place it will come out of will be in each department. We'll start to have to designate that workload to somebody. And of course, our job as a business is we go into companies and we kind of help fill that gap and help them understand what it means to do that. But there's still that fear, uncertainty, and doubt that they don't really understand what to do. They understand potentially the outcome that they're trying to achieve, but they have no idea on how to reach it. And they might have tried a couple of different tools out there, but the reality is that I would say 90% of the things that are out there have zero training and testing capability, which is shocking, but it's true. But it's because, why? It's the heavy lifting, it's the hard stuff, and it's not easy in the sense that to implement a very solid training and testing tool that is easy to use, but is not easy. So most of these AI products out there, they'll have like a text box where you put in some instructions, and they're like, okay, and then maybe a link to a website where it'll scrape it, and then they go, okay, your AI is trained, and it's like, no, bro, it's not. It's not. And so like when you start talking about complexities of like, okay, I've got like great example. Here's 3 examples that we are like currently doing right now. One is a medical company or healthcare company that has does 3,000 phone calls a week that we're taking transcripts and training on, right? We have another one that has, over 40,000 support tickets that have happened over the last 3 years, and not really a centralized database or knowledge base to speak of. So they want to somehow consolidate that information, right? And then we have real-time training where, you have conversations that are happening on, for example, Confluence or Jira within a development environment. where they want the AI to be trained on tickets and documentation that's happening as the project is real time. So, you can see very easily when you get past this is kind of a cool tool. Look, I can upload this and look, it's so cool. But then you go, okay, let's put this into practice. Let's put this into where it can actually impact my business. There's a massive cliff where you go, okay, this is much bigger than just dragging and dropping a couple documents into a thing.
100%.
I need to integrate this. I need to have workflow. I need to be able to figure out how do I convert and transform this unstructured data from a data source or different file types or different whatever destinations or different apps. How do I consolidate that into a format that actually can put into an AI and so it actually knows how to answer these questions? That in itself ain't easy. So just like
AI ain't easy. That's
exactly.
That's the tagline here.
Yeah, it's like pimping. AI ain't easy.
There it is.
So, but bottom line is when you're looking at this as a scope of work, when you're talking, I want to build out an AI agent. Let's just start with something very simple. Go ahead and basically put 80% of the work is training. That's, so when you see somebody kind of throwing an AI agent together, spinning one up and going, oh, look, I created an AI agent in 5 minutes. Yeah. Okay. That doesn't that's great. And maybe it works for whatever small use case you're talking about. But what they fail to mention is okay, if you actually want to put this to work inside of enterprise, the amount of work that's not necessarily even AI. It's all the heavy lifting we talked about to get to the point where that AI is trained and able to answer questions with a high efficacy. Is no easy task.
Yeah, and it's the first layer to get you to kind of you're going to start hearing a lot more people talk about orchestration, right? And it's very difficult to do with all these systems and pieces in place that's plugged into if it doesn't know what the hell it's supposed to do from the get-go.
Yeah, and so I think this is another reason, just like a little bit of a tangential point, is that why it's going to be hard for a lot of enterprises, especially ones that have been around quite a long time, to make these massive shifts into adopting and deploying AI, because the brick wall they're going to continually run into is integration and training. Like they have to still integrate it with their existing systems, which is usually a mess, spaghetti, and they have to somehow train it on data, which they don't necessarily know which data is correct. And they're not willing to take the risk of throwing out something that's 90% accurate, even though one could argue that every single employee they have at a minimum is making 10% mistakes every day. Like humans aren't perfect either. So it's just that we don't put it under that same scrutiny. Whereas maybe a startup or a small company who kind of had the benefit of starting from zero and building out these systems AI first are going to have a massive advantage, because it's almost like every aspect of their business was built with AI in mind. Another reason why we talk about on this pod quite a bit about creating these separation of projects within AI within a company, where maybe don't force it through the legacy or the bureaucracy of what you currently have in play, but extract that information or find a way to extract it in a fundamental manner and isolate it in its own world, and then start from ground up with an AI first mentality. That's something I've been pushing for, or just kind of arguing with myself, but more importantly, every day that goes by, feeling like it's the right approach is in the coding world, right? That's an obvious one, which is everybody's like, oh, I spent years of my life, and including me, building this software. I've got this amazing platform that I've spent 4 or 5 years of my life building. It's got so much code. And I'm going to use AI to go in there and try to fix it, or try to enhance it, or try to make it better, or try to transfer it to this. But that might be a fool's errand. It might just be because AI doesn't want to read your crappy code, and it certainly might reimagine it completely different in a better way on a new stack. So, is it better to kind of go down that path, or is it better to reinvent it from ground up and slowly but surely replace it over time? Again, these are all philosophical questions, but that same decision point is for support and for sales and for everything else in your business. Like I can make the same argument for support. Oh, I've got Intercom over here, or I've got Salesforce over here, and I'm spending I put all this energy and time configuring it and hundreds of thousands of dollars to get it up and running. And Is it the best thing in the world? No. Do people like it? Not really.
No.
But I spent all this energy. I've got all this. I'm just going to throw AI at this beast of a thing and see if it works. Whereas it might just make sense to start and it might make sense to isolate AI over here. I'm not saying you can't
slowly replace over time.
You can still integrate and you can still pull and push, but it might make more sense to kind of isolate it, because then you have this fresh mindset of like, well, if AI is going to do everything, do I need all of these menu items and navigational menus and and you're like, no, I don't really need all this. I just need to know if my customers are happy or not. I need to know like how much money I made. I need to know like basic general,
operating stuff.
Information to make decisions that are best for my business. And and this goes back to our point is that we are in a transformational age where this is bigger than technology. In fact, it's more business and a business transformation than it is a technical platform transformation. And if you're in business and you're not thinking this way, then there is a high likelihood that you will, the inertia will eventually pull you into the deep. So I think it's just a matter of time where companies have to decide, okay, am I going to take a big swing at this? When is the right time? And how do I iteratively do this so that I don't disrupt what I'm currently doing, but I am clearly positioning myself best for the future?
Absolutely. And we covered a lot on here. Obviously, we'll have to continue the discussion on a few things. But for those listening, thanks again for joining us on this episode. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button to stay in touch. Also, check out our Substack for more content, which will be linked to this episode to continue this discussion. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and we'll see you on the next episode. Take care, everyone.
Welcome